Right, so I'm trying something different here just because the lighting in the last video was upsetting me. This is the episode about Tuckman's stages of group development focused on group performing, which is where, your team really gets going, they really start making progress, and you as a leader can more or less step back and watch the magic happen. So here we go. So in this stage, the team is more aware of what you need from them. They understand what you need, they understand the constraints, they understand the information they have, the information that they need to get. They know where they're going, they know who is able to make decisions, what needs to come to you and what they can decide by themselves. And what this gives them is a sense of confidence that they haven't had previously, and that confidence gives them momentum to keep going, to keep making more decisions, to keep asking more questions, to keep seeking more information. And having this confidence builds enthusiasm, because it's lovely to know exactly what you're doing and know how to succeed. So you'll start to see that in the attitudes. Keep in mind that through the forming stage, they've already done all the nice things, like, they've formed a team, they have that sense of belonging, so that's been built. But now it's all about, performing, getting outcomes. As with any workplace, you might get this natural attrition of people leaving the team and joining it, but the team is solid enough in their purpose, how they work, what the hierarchy is in the team, that new people tend to slot in fairly easily. As I mentioned in the previous video, there's always the risk that you might return to a storming phase, but for most instances, the team will absorb that new person and bring them on board, find their place, or help them find their place in the team quite easily. What you might see at this stage is the confidence turn into overconfidence. That's not necessarily a bad thing. You do see a bit of bravado, and that's I think it creates a nice working environment if you do have people. But what you need to do as a leader is make sure that the team is not overcommitting you to things that might be unachievable in the long run. And I think if you've been chosen to lead a project, that's usually because you've done something similar before and you have an understanding of what needs to be done, or what the limitations are. Not to say that those limitations can't be removed, but you want to at least make sure that if people are over-promising, that you have a pretty good strategy for overcoming those limitations before you make those promises. So just be aware. Disagreements might still occur by the team members, but they tend to handle them themselves. So you don't need to get involved that often. And as we touched on briefly in the previous stage, where you might be looking for opportunities to develop people, in this stage you might get people in the team starting to go, yep, I know exactly what I'm doing and now I'm ready to learn more. So be prepared for team members to approach you looking for learning and development opportunities. And one of the best ways you can respond to those is to receive the suggestion, have a look at what opportunities are there or could realistically come up in the future, and work with those people to try and meet them if possible, because that shows your dedication to the team and its performance, and to the people in the team. What you'll find at this stage is where everyone is happy, confident and achieving, customer service tends to increase. So if you're the kind of team that has to, either do face-to-face customer service, or to interface with clients, on a corporate level, or even internal clients, you'll find that your team interacts with those people well. If those people make a request, your team will tend to give realistic ways for how those requests can be met and can be integrated, and they feel that they have the autonomy to make those kind of statements as well. So it's a good place to be, and ideally for a longer project, most of the time would be spent in this phase. Be prepared to adapt your leadership style. So because everyone is able to take charge and to make decisions, the risk you run is that you don't adapt to that quickly enough, and what was in the earlier stages helping and removing roadblocks can suddenly be interpreted as micromanaging. So be aware that you need to step back, you need to let them do what they're going to do. And I mean, one of the philosophies that my mum always had was, if you're not going to do it yourself, then let other people take control and be prepared to accept the outcomes that they come up with. And what she meant by that was that you can't do everything. And the reason you've brought these people in is because they have perspectives different from yourself. You need to be prepared to accept what you see coming out of the team. And as long as it meets the project objectives, it meets whatever relevant standards and codes there are, it's safe, it does what it needs to do, then you don't need to have absolute control over every decision that they're making. And you'd be wise not to criticize the things that are being produced by the team unless there is a fatal flaw. So be prepared for the outcomes, not to look exactly how you were expecting them to look, but rather appreciate them for the collaborative effort that comes out of having multiple different experts in a room together. Okay. But part of that is that you do actually need to keep tabs on what's coming out of the team. Make sure you understand the decisions that they're making. Make sure you understand the reasons why they're making those decisions, because ultimately you're the one that does need to report to the higher ups as well. So you need to be able to understand why the team went in a particular direction. And sometimes on large projects, again, what you'll find that the team makes a recommendation that when viewed in isolation isn't the most cost-effective solution, or it isn't the easiest one, or the one that can be delivered quickest. And sometimes projects that you're working on do have time frame constraints, and so the speed with which they can be delivered is a key factor and is of great interest to the higher ups in the management team. But what those people need to understand is that the team is not completing a project in isolation. They're completing it in the context of the business, the environment that you operate in. And these were all things that I touched in the group forming video. And so that overall context will influence the recommendations that the team makes, and they might choose the third most cost-effective option that can be delivered the quickest, eliminating options that are not technically feasible. You need to be able to understand that, but also to communicate that to the leadership team that you report to. So that's why it's important for you to be across the decisions that the team is making. And if you have any probing questions that you think leadership will ask you, you need to ask those as the decisions are being made, so that you're early on in the process forming the arguments that you're then going to use to communicate to the board. Just be aware of that. It's not easy sailing for you just because you're no longer involved in the day-to-day of the teamwork. You now need to focus on how you're going to sell the outcomes of the team to other people in the organization. One final note is that this team performing stage doesn't necessarily just apply to projects. It can also apply to your ordinary work situation. So you go into work, you sit in a pod. Some people call them teams, some people call them groups, some people call them divisions. You'll find that those tend to operate under a team performing stage, because the people who sit in your pod have probably all been there for a relative amount of time. You'll know who each other are. You probably had a few disagreements. Now you're working together. New people get absorbed pretty easily. So it reflects a lot of the attributes that you'd normally assign to team performing. So yeah, that's another, if you're not involved in a team project at the moment, just looking at your current work environment is a good way to observe how this particular stage of team development works. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe to see more, and thank you for watching Leader Logic. I hope that you get to enact some of these in the future.